So this picture was taken in London near St. Paul's Cathedral 2 weeks back when I went for the Urban Sketchers London meet. And I sat there for about 3.5 hours to sketch. And this is where I sat down. And you can actually see St. Paul's Cathedral in the background. Our main focus here is the telephone box. I just simply chose this because I like the lovely colors in the background. I can even add in a little bit more colorful foliage in the background as well. Let's start with the telephone box, which is somewhere here. So if you are joining me for this paint along, you can use any material that you like. It doesn't have to be the same exact same materials I use. I will be using pen and watercolor, and this is just an initial sketch for the basic lines. You don't need to do this either. You can go straight away with watercolors or pen if you like. I can't see the top as much, only the sides because it's kind of curving down. So that's where the little writing comes. Writing comes here as well. And then I'm going to do like a slight curved line like that. And that's the curvy bit on the side. So this is just rough again because it's pencil. I can always rub it out. I might even make a few tweaks when I'm working with pen later on. It's really hard to get the straight lines. Sometimes I get a little bit wonky, which is okay. We are just enjoying the sketch. So that's some foliage in the foreground. This lampshade on the side, just going to make it a little bit quirky. It's already slanting on the side because I was sitting down. The angle of the photo is such that it feels slanting. So just going to make it a bit quirky. Try and slant it a little bit more. So you can see my lamp is a little bit more slanting compared to what is in the picture. You don't have to do that. It's just I like to make things a bit more dramatic sometimes. And that's the base of the lamp. That's it. You can add the tree or leave it. It's completely up to you. I might just add because I like the shadow that it casts. So a quick sketch for the tree. You can never predict how your paintings or your sketches go until you finish them, because I can make a mess out of it today. So no expectations. We're just sketching because we love sketching, and that's it. That's the only expectation today, to enjoy the process. So there's some more bushes in the background. If you look in the picture, you can see like more details like here. There's marked out area, like a planter area, which you don't need to include all that. You can just do a suggestion of foliage here. And then some trees in the background, some large shrubs. I might make it a bit more colorful. So we've got the initial sketch with all my wonky lines. So next step is either to start with watercolor or with pen. It's completely up to you what you want to do first. So with pen, I'm using fountain pen filled with sketch ink. The sketch ink is waterproof, so I'll show you what I'm using. This is the one I'm using today. So it's waterproof. It's really good. And the good thing about waterproof is you can add watercolor over it, like a quick wash if you like. So with the pen, I think I'm going to be a little bit more bold with my lines, or any little tweaks or mistakes that happened with the pencil. I can make the correction right now. So let's start off with the telephone box, the star of the show today. So that's the top. So now I'm just simply following the lines. They look quite okay to me. And you don't need to have clean lines. You can make it quite scribbly if you like. That way you get a lot of character in your sketch. And those wobbly lines actually make your sketch even more beautiful. All those double lines, kind of adding shadow here. So adding more details now. Again, they're just scribbly lines. Now let's do the door of the telephone box. So just slightly making a few lines for details. I don't know why, but every time I sketch a telephone box, I keep thinking about Paddington Bear. It's one of my favorite movies and books because I have children. I think I have read it to them a million times already, and I kind of have fallen in love with the story as well. And if you've seen the movie, there is a scene where he tries to hide inside a telephone box or tries to make a call or something. And I just like that scene for some reason. So that's the top of the telephone box. Adding extra darker line here to show shadow. And then finishing off those foliage. At this stage, you can add like darker lines for shadows and the darker areas as well. You can do it all with pen and then do like a quick watercolor sketch wash over it. Or it's completely up to you to just do like outline and then do everything else in watercolors. I do both. It depends on what sort of mood I am in. I enjoy both the process. You can even do these little leaf-like shapes if you like. It kind of adds character to your sketch. So just going to darken that area. That's like the darkest part. If you look at the reference picture, it's kind of, there's a lot of shadow there on this side. So I'm just going to render this area. And just adding a little bit of rendering here as well. So just suggesting some shadow. Very light marks for the shadow because I don't want to make the shadows too heavy. And then let's do that tree. We need the source of the shadow, and that's this tree. So now you can see where I made like a little mistake of that tree being a little bit higher above. And now with the pen, I've kind of figured that out, made that little change. So it's a good way to work in steps. So again, just scribbling for now. A quick scribble for the foliage. Just darkening a few more areas here, adding more character to the bush. I'm working a lot on this bush because that's the one that's right in front of us. The ones in the background, maybe I can just leave it for watercolors, like a quick wash. And then there's a lot of shadow here, so just a few lines to show shadow. Okay, now let's move on. Oh, before we do, just going to render here inside the telephone box just to mark where the darker areas are. There's like a little sign on top there, so I'm making that mark. And okay, let's leave the telephone box, moving on to this quirky little street lamp. And then quick lines for the top of the lamp. And then again, scribbly lines for all the other details. Making these little scribbly lines is also kind of a therapy for me, so it's okay to scribble, kind of adds character and it makes you feel happy as well. Okay, for the trees in the background, I'm not going to do a lot of details, so maybe I'll mark out a few darker areas here in the background, and let's do like a very quick wash in the background, so very light marks, and then that'll all be a watercolor wash. So we are now done with the sketch. At this stage, if you do have a lot of pencil lines in the background, you can choose to rub it off. Okay, let's move on to watercolors. I'm going to start with the telephone box first. So if you have your reference picture with you, or if you can look here, you can see that the side that is facing us is darker compared to this side of the telephone box. So with the brush, you can use any round or flat brush, anything that you are personally comfortable with. I am using this is a Chinese brush, and it's a medium-sized round pointed. Something similar to this would be a size 10 or size 8 round brush. So this is size 10 and this is size 8, and you can choose which one you like personally depending on the size of your painting as well. So let's start off with some red. The first wash is going to be a very light one of red, and trying to leave these areas, this white area, unpainted, as well as the top, because it looks very bright. And then for this side, because it's very light, I'm just going to add a few lines and then leave it at that. Maybe add a little bit on the side. And now I'm going to move on to some green, diluted green a little bit. Similar consistency, watery consistency to what I've done with red. And I'm just going to try and add a little bit here, leaving a little bit of white areas as well. It's kind of reflecting light. It's okay if it mixes with the red. And then starting only with the darker areas, and I'm going to see how it goes. Maybe add a few spots here and there. And then a few more scribbles on the background. For the bushes in the background, I'm going to use the same sap green, but it is in the background and I'd like it to be a little bit more cooler in color. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of cobalt blue with the green I'm using now. So it kind of becomes, it's not blue-green yet, but it's definitely not this bright green. So that's more like a blue-green color. Going to add a tiny bit of cobalt blue with it as well. Fresh cobalt blue in the background. And splatter as well if you like. Let's add a little bit more cobalt blue into that sap green, make it really blue-green this time. And I'm going to do the bush in the background. Okay, now I'm going to add some more color in the background for all the foliage in the background. So starting off with a little bit of orange or yellow, maybe add a tiny bit of rose as well. And you can keep your brush strokes very loose. So for that, I'm going to do large strokes like this. And then maybe add a tiny bit of rose as well. It might be too bright, so I'm starting off with a few spots. Okay, so for the tree in the foreground, let's add nice green now. So this time, again, going back into that sap green, I like to tone it down slightly because I like kind of a dull, more mature green. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of red. It kind of becomes a little bit of dull green now. So let me show it to you here. So can you see that green? It's definitely different to this bright green here. So that is only because I've mixed sap green with a bit of red. And then a quick splatter for the tree trunk, sepia, and I'm using it straight from the tube, just on the tip of my brush. Okay, so now let's start working a little bit more on the telephone box because this was only the first wash. So going back into my red and darkening this side. A few lines. You don't have to do it with watercolors. You can leave it as such with pen if you feel you can't do it with the brush. But if not, do give it a try. I think I need it a little bit more deeper because it's really in the shadow, especially this corner here. So I'm going to take some more red, mix a little bit of ultramarine blue. So it sort of becomes like a deep red now. Let's start by adding a little bit here on top, here on the lines, and maybe some on the side. A few lines with that dark red. Going to splatter the color. For the other side, I think it's too bright now, so I like to tone it down. So I'm going to grab some more red, this time a lot of water, making it quite watery to do like a quick wash on this side. I think that's enough, and then I can use like a washed brush to tone it down slightly. And I'm going to leave the top white because it kind of reflects light, as you can see in the picture. And now I'm going to do some shadows now. I'm going to use ultramarine blue or French ultramarine, whichever you have, with a very little bit of permanent red or red that you have been using for the telephone box. This is only to tone down the blue. You don't need to do it. You can just use ultramarine blue straight away. I'm going to start here with the bottom part of the bush. Quick wash here. Some shadows on the ground. And you can see the green has actually flowed into the blue as well, which is okay. And that is the shadow of the tree done. So just going to wash my brush, take out extra pigment. So I have only a little bit of water here, and then I'm going to lighten this area. There. So now for the other shadows, again moving on to ultramarine blue again, with tiny bit of red. Some shadows here, maybe a little bit here in the background. You can smudge with your fingers as well if you like. A little bit of shadow here. And I can use the same shadow color to add a few branches here in the background. I'd like a little bit more deeper color just where the branches are. So I'm going to go back into some green, maybe mix a tiny bit of red to make it deeper. And then I can add another layer of watercolor here to make it darker. What I would do is I will wait for the watercolors to dry completely and see if I need to add a little bit more details with the pen. This illustration is now completely dry, so I'm going to go over it with a little bit more ink to make a few details stand out. For this, I can either use the same Lamy pen that I have been using before, or I can use another pen. It doesn't matter. You can even use color pencils or pastels, anything that works for you. So for now, I am going to use my dip pen with Indian ink. I like the characteristic lines that a dip pen can provide. So I'm going to start using that and see how it works. So I don't need to add a lot of details, only a few extra enhancing just to make the whole thing stand out a bit more. So I'm going to start off with maybe a few lines to render the post box on this side because there's a little bit of shadow here. And I'm being really careful because Indian ink can be really dark and it could stand out quite well. And I don't want to overwork an area. So just adding a few lines just where it needs to be a bit more darker, just to show some shadows. And here as well. Now the top of the telephone box and this side of the telephone box, I'd like to leave it as it is because there's a lot of light that is hitting on this side, and if I do any more work on it, it may not look as light. It could get a little bit overworked, so I'm going to be very careful not to do a lot of work there, or perhaps even just leave it as it is. Okay, so you can see how I have enhanced a little bit here around the bushes. That way you can see the bushes to stand out a little bit more. Now here, I'm just going to add a few more lines, maybe add like little cobbled stones on the footpath. So I get a little bit of details here. And making those stones a bit more smaller, adding like a variety of sizes. It kind of adds more interest that way. So I'm going to enhance this area a bit more, just darkening this area slightly so the telephone box kind of stands out when I enhance that area. And then adding little dots and dashes just to add some very minute details in the background. And at the same time, I don't want to overwork, which is why I'm starting off with little dots and dashes. And then as I'm coming to this side, lesser details, because that's not really a focus point. So I'm just going to finish off with the details that is in this area and then leave the rest how it is. There's this little yellow symbol here on top of the telephone box, and I'd like to add that as well. You can either go back to using watercolor straight from the tube, a little bit on the tip of your brush to mark that in. If not, you can even use pastels or color pencils, something that, or even gouache if you have, something that sits on top. So I am actually going to try and use a little bit of pastels because they are nice and bright and I think it might sit on top nicely. I'm going to try the bright yellow. This is more like lemon yellow. And I'm going to use a little bit of white as well. And then I can use the same color on this side as well. That was our final touch, and with this our sketch is finished. I hope you really enjoyed watching this. You can even try and paint along if you like, but if you do, please feel free to share it with me. I'll see you soon with more videos. Bye.